speaking loudly is usually not my issue.
Oh, hell. That's an understatement of a lifetime.
Hardly ever need a microphone wherever I go.
Welcome into the Ben Burnett Show. My name is Ben Burnett. This is a podcast on the Appen Podcast Network. I want to thank my very good friend and special guest, Katie Reeves, for joining me today. Welcome in, Katie.
Thank you, Ben.
Katie, for those of you who don't know, the vast majority of Alpharetta is covered by school board member Katie Reeves, who has been a staple fixture, insert adjective here in the community for many years. And I thought as I've gotten to, I think you're my 25th episode.
That's pretty impressive.
I can't believe I've got 25 people to come talk to me. But I thank you for stopping in today. If you don't mind, just tell people real quick who you are, your backstory, where are you from, mom and them, whole nine. Go ahead.
Whole 9 yards. Okay.
Give it to me.
So I'm Katie Reeves. I represent District 2 on the Fulton County School Board, and I'm in my 21st year of service. And I come from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, by way of the University of Kentucky. We're in mourning this week, but we'll get over it. And
big basketball fans?
Yes, we do tend to be basketball fans. Met my husband there, and 2 of my kids have their degrees from UK. So we bleed blue pretty significantly in my house.
Don't call you in late March or April after an L.
It's tough. It's a tough week, but met my husband there. We have 3 kids. I got 1 boy and 2 girls, and they're young adults now, gainfully employed, and off our nickel, which is kind of awesome.
Yeah, hey, good for you. All right, before we go into anything else, I always like to show people that you elected official types are actually human beings. Is John Calipari overrated?
No, and I'll tell you why.
Tell me why.
He's from Pittsburgh.
That's not a good reason.
Oh, it's an excellent reason. It is hands down an excellent reason. He is a burger, which he's great anyways, but that just kind of is icing on the cake for me.
I just didn't know if you guys had gotten to a place where you were frustrated with all the hype, the fact that he makes an enormous salary, and I think he's been there almost a decade and won 1 title. Is that good enough?
Kentucky fans want to win every single year.
Every year.
And they had a list in the newspaper of the bonuses all the coaches were going to get if they won. It was from the Sweet 16. And they all get different levels of bonuses depending on what they make. And John Calipari doesn't get any bonus.
It's the expectation.
It is the expectation.
Man, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so I digress. Thank you for diving in. Proud alumni of Kentucky. So when did you move to Alpharetta?
30 years ago.
30 years ago, and how old were your children at the time?
1 wasn't born yet.
So they were babies.
One was 16 months. No, 1 was 20 months and 1 was 5 months.
So I've asked Jan Jones this because I have the great pleasure of knowing you 30 years later. I don't have the great pleasure of knowing you then. What possessed you to get involved in current events? Who was the person that sparked your interest? What were you following? What were the issues of the day where you were just where somebody said the right thing to you and you were like, I'm in?
You know, I left my career to be a stay-at-home mom. We moved here, and you can't even imagine what Alpharetta was like back then. There was 1 stoplight. It was where the old city hall was, and there was a lot of green space. And there were so many families moving here. And as my kids started getting ready to go to school, my oldest started looking at kindergarten, and I started looking at the issues. I was a Don Quixote of North Fulton, for a little bit. I went to the library meetings, I went to the planning commission meetings, I went to Fulton County, I went to Alpharetta City Hall, I went everywhere. And one of the city council people at City Hall, I went up to complain about the overcrowding and they shouldn't zone any more houses and yada
What
yada.
year? What year was this?
Oh, let's see. That was 92.
Wow.
92.
Well, you lost. You didn't complain loud enough or often enough.
So they told me that it was really Fulton County Commission's fault because they were zoning most of that stuff. So I'm like, hey, that's the next place I'm going. Took my double stroller, went down to Taj Mahal downtown.
Right.
Gadunk, 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 gadunk down the steps. I had my say, made the newspaper for the first time. And it was worrying about my kids, that drove me. And I became the crazy mom at the school bus stop that always talks about curriculum instead of their decorating, People's eyes would glaze over, and started talking to my representatives, and I got to know Mark Burkhalter. He was knocking doors, door to door. He came to the door, and I recognized his name from, all my Don Quixote work. I'm like, oh, this is an important guy. He comes in, and got to know him. He knew of my interest for schools, and when a position was open on the Fulton County School Board, he called me and he said, "You ought to run."
So when you did that, because I love to hear you tell the story that you said as a planning commissioner with Brandon Beach.
Brandon actually was an alternate on the planning commission when I was on the planning commission.
Congressional candidate.
Candidate, yes. I did a stint on the Alpharetta Tree Commission.
So you mentored,
and the Alpharetta Planning Commission. I totally did. Do I get to take a little bit of responsibility? I don't know if I want it.
It's not credit.
Should
You're
I?
taking responsibility. That's funny. I'm sure in some small way he feels like that about me. And so as you were sort of the school bus stop, not activist, but you paid attention.
Yes.
And slowly dipped your toe in. Did was he representative at the time or Speaker of the House?
He was representative.
He was
Representative Mark Burkhalter when he called me to, because I was really worried about curriculum. I was worried about the overcrowding. I had a full plate of worries as a young mom, and I just wanted to do something about it. And Alpharetta was so new and growing then. It was just such a new group of people moving in. And, when you're young and you're raising your kids, it's hard to keep tabs on everything that's going on. So I started a newsletter. I just was trying to get everybody I wanted everybody informed. There was a lot of great families moving here, had, a lot of education, a lot to offer our community. I wanted them to be involved.
So we're going to get to how you've seen curriculum and things like that change as a school board member, but when you ran that first race, your husband, by all accounts, is I would never typically say this to a female, but Cliff Reeves would be anyone's better half. He's a gentleman and a scholar. If I ever had the chance to put him on any board, I'd just do it for entertainment value.
He's awesome, isn't he?
He is a absolute riot. If you ever see Katie out at dinner, you need to stop him because he is. I'm sure you guys agree most of the time, but I'm sure when you don't, it is colorful.
It is colorful. It is colorful, yes.
So as you ran that first school board race, how overwhelmed were you?
You can't even, a couple of things. First of all, you can't even begin to understand. You do because you did it. But you write that check for when you qualify. And
you think, oh, hell, what have I done?
And I'm like, what have I done? And you are out on a limb. And I probably would be the person least likely to run for elected office in high school. People would have said, no way. And something about having children and having the passion, it gives you the voice, right? But I got out there and it was like, I didn't know what I was doing. I was asking people, how do you run a campaign? Oh my gosh, I have to ask for money and I have to write checks out of my own account and I have to walk door to door and sell myself to people.
Like a serial killer.
It's just overwhelming. It's very overwhelming. But the other thing that I learned, and I've gone and talked to a couple of history classes, in high schools about it. It's the most amazing country that we live in, that anybody can
What-
take an interest in what's happening in their local community. And if they're willing to work hard and have some good ideas and some passion, anybody can win.
I think what's so funny about what you just said is that the average person doesn't realize that you can just go down every 2 or every 4 years and qualify. But the same thing is true if I decided for some crazy reason that I wanted to go run a Republican primary against David Perdue, a incumbent United States senator. When qualifying comes open in a year and a half, I can go down there with my $5,000 or whatever it is and pay my money, and he has to beat me.
That's exactly right.
And I don't think the vast majority of people have no idea that it literally is that open of a process.
And that's what, it was the most invigorating thing that I've ever done, that first race. To feel like if you worked hard enough, knocked on enough doors, and had some decent ideas, you got a seat at the table. And it could be anybody. It could be you or me.
It could be anybody.
But that's rare, and it's awesome. And you're right. People don't think about it. They think about, they might complain about something, and it's like, you can do something.
Yeah, go tell Johnny Isaacson that you want to beat him.
But it is. Boy, when I think of that, I just think, wow, what a great country we live in.
It is really interesting to be able to do that. So let's go here. So it's 21 years. What was your first year as an elected official?
A lot of 6-1 votes,
Yep.
a roller coaster, a really steep learning curve.
Yeah, because for those of you who don't know, Fulton County was it 65 or 70 miles long from the top to the bottom. And they don't always, people in the north part of the county, in the city of Atlanta, or in the south part of the county, don't always feel the same way about the issues.
It's the only non-contiguous school district in the country.
Oh, because Atlanta cuts it out?
City of Atlanta schools are right in the middle of our district, and we have to go north and south. So it's an interesting school. It's It's changed a lot in 21 years.
Talk about some of that when you were sitting there, I guess in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, running your race. You're a school board member. Do you remember the issues of the day?
I 100% remember them. I mean, one of the first things I did, somebody gave me some good advice, and they said, take a weekend and think about your core beliefs, what you really believe in. Because you're not going to be able to tell somebody what you're going to vote every vote, right? But if you can tell people what you truly believe in, then that'll guide you, and it gives people a good idea who you are. One of the things that I really believed in, and this sounds silly, and unless you have an issue at your local school, you don't understand it. I believe that when your child crosses the threshold of a Fulton County school, they are still your children, and you still have a say. And it's shocking to find out that that didn't used to be the case all the time. And you would get random educators who thought that once your child was dropped off at the door, they got to make all the decisions. And I think Fulton County is a very, we value the input of parents. I think that's really important. The other thing I felt like a good education doesn't always equal the most money. I think that if that was true, Washington, D.C. would have the best schools in the country.
Right.
So I think that I was very, from a fiscal conservative standpoint, I was like, the schools should get enough money, but we shouldn't reach into somebody's pocket and take more than we need. So that was another thing that I really, really strongly believed in. And at that time, we were so overcrowded, it was just ridiculous. And we couldn't build the schools fast enough, and we weren't getting enough attention in North County. Like, they were just letting our schools go crowded rather than build to address the need. And part of that was because our districts are determined every 10 years by the census, right? And so at the end of the 90s, 40% of Fulton County schools and 40% of Fulton County students and families were in my district alone. So it really wasn't getting a lot of the attention.
Yeah, and it was a significant piece of the population.
It was a huge piece of the population, and
How many people? I saw something last week that said Fulton County has, it's either 1.05 or 1.1 million people that live in it.
I know that each of our districts, which doesn't include City of Atlanta, we have generally about 80,000 people, registered people there.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
That's about right, and 95,000 students. The school district when I started was about 45,000 students, so it's doubled in size. Our poverty back when I started was 35% free and reduced lunch, and now it's more like 45 or 46%.
Really?
Yes, yes.
Is that North County and the
Yes.
southern part of the county? You've seen them grow in both places.
Poverty's grown in both places. It has.
Interesting.
It has. There's poverty in North Fulton that I think a lot of our organizations that help people know. If you go and talk to somebody from Greater North Fulton
Community
Charities, they know. If you go talk to United Way, they know. You talk to the churches, they know. There's more poverty here than we recognize.
Absolutely, because when you tell me that, to me as a guy, and so everybody knows, my oldest child will be in kindergarten next year. So I have a lot of learning to do about this, and Katie's over here snickering at me because I feel like if you've sat in an elected office for 20 years, you have seen the entire mill of issues. You've seen a group of parents raise young kids. You've seen them move them on into college, into adulthood. And then you've got another group of young parents, and it just goes on as Tom Petty says, the road goes on forever and the party never ends.
The perspective is really great, though, because I'll tell you honestly, I joined the board with all kinds of energy and enthusiasm for learning about curriculum and all the different parts. But it's hard to understand what a middle school parent's going through unless you got a middle schooler going through it. It's hard to understand all the issues of high school. You got a high schooler going through it. I've had 3 kids go through Fulton County schools, and yes, you do see the issues. But I always remember what it was like. I always remember what it was like to be that mad parent who went to their school board member and they wouldn't listen. And I was just appalled. I was like, oh my gosh, I always remember that.
Well, so I'm gonna seek advice, which is something I've never done in the history of the podcast. So I have developed a very good relationship with the leadership at Alpharetta Elementary School.
A great school.
And they asked me to be their community member on their school governance council. And I think part of that is because I have a child going into elementary school, but they didn't have to elect me. They could just kind of plug me in as a community member. And I sent a text message to somebody today that was like, I have no idea what you people want with me.
Did you really?
I'll show it to you. I have no preconceived notion that what should I expect? What does a school governance council? Every school has one.
Every school in Fulton County has one. Yes.
Talk about what that is.
Okay, so
and the PTA. Talk about both of them.
So we're a charter district, which means that we have an agreement with the state of Georgia that our student achievement has to be X level, and if we do that, we get some freedom and flexibility from some of the tight constraints that the state, all those guardrails they put around us. We use it very judiciously in an organized way that we let the state know about that. But a lot of what a charter district is that our board believes very deeply that a lot of decisions are best made as close to locally as possible. Like you said, we are a 72-mile long district. And I think every one of our communities is very different. So some of those decisions, there has to be some flexibility to allow Alpharetta Elementary to make a different decision than an elementary school in Roswell or Sandy Springs or one of our many South County cities, because they may need different things. And when I started on the school system, it was like everybody gets exactly the same thing, no question, boom, boom, boom. And now we've advanced to a place of trust with the constituents where we could put in place this system that allows for a little bit more flexibility. So we allow some flexible dollars to go to the local school, and the school governance team with the principal works on how to spend those dollars. They work on the strategic plan together. Every one of our schools has a different strategic plan. They all use our basic strategic plan as a framework, but they'll differ a little bit. This one wants to concentrate on the social emotional a little bit. This school community thinks that our reading scores are dipping and we need to focus on that. Everybody has got just a little bit of flavor. And I love the idea of community members on the school governance council, because in Fulton County School District, 70% of the people that pay taxes do not have children in school. And you look around and you think we're all families, right?
And at some point, most have been.
Most have been, but at any given time,
Yeah, I currently fit in that 70%.
you do fit in that 70%. And so having our community members come in and see some of the great things our schools are doing, but also some of the challenges they face, and giving them a voice, I think is fabulous. So I think you'll love it. I think it'll, again, be a little bit of a learning curve to start out with, but that's good.
I think it's going to be a tremendous learning curve.
Yeah.
I think they asked me to be a rubber stamp. Yes.
Okay, so that was one of the things that I really didn't want when I first ran for the school board. I thought they were 7 potted plants. Roll them out once a month to raise their hand and say yes. The current board we have is not 7 potted plants at all.
No.
So the dynamic of the board, the cultural norms of the board have changed significantly over 20 years. And I'm not going to say that, my absolute willingness to speak out on any given issue has played a part in that, but probably has.
Well, I think that's really interesting, because when you look at the makeup of United States Congress or a county commission or something like that, I think it's fair to say that the 7 of us that sit on the city council in Alpharetta don't agree on everything, but our disagreements are a lot closer together than your disagreements on the Fulton County School Board. I feel like you have a lot bigger marketplace of ideas that takes place, because there are certain people that grow up with a certain value system, and you're just not going to shake that. Just like I have a certain value system that I'm never going to necessarily betray. I feel like a lot of us on the city council in Alpharetta share not a similar upbringing, but I don't feel like we're the most diverse group of opinions you're ever going to find.
You would think that, looking at our board and looking at Fulton County in general. I think 10 or more years ago, there was definitely a lot more division on the board. But one of the things that we focused on in the last 10 years is, the right kind of governance is to really focus on the things that you do share.
Absolutely.
And you know that. And so our board goes on an awful lot of retreats, and we spend time on governance. And we try to self-correct as much as we can when we get too in the weeds, because the superintendent is supposed to do day to day,
And they do.
And they do. And we're supposed to focus on, the policy. And I just presented in Philadelphia at the National School Board Association on our policy development. And what the one thing that people were really there was 200 people in the seminar, and it stops them in their tracks every time we present at a national conference. We'll bring up our community meetings, because every month I have essentially a town hall meeting, and every board member does in their community, where we talk about what's going on for that month. Do you know that it just stops people in their tracks. The board members that are in there go, "You do what? You meet by yourself?" Because while city councils are often, you guys tend to meet with people by yourselves a lot, school boards across the country often don't do that.
And what's the logic behind that?
The logic behind that is that you have actually no authority as a single person. And your superintendent is in charge with day to day. I think that city council people probably are a little bit more involved in the day to day. You guys all have committees and things that you kind of oversee and stay in touch with. But as board members, we really are supposed to do our work as a body of 7. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of ethics and things that they like to put a lot of constraints on school board members lest one go rogue. But our board is pretty trusting that each of us, I don't go out and talk about a whole bunch of different things at my community meeting that are really going on.
Well, and you're a board of directors for $1 billion budget.
Yes.
It's a whole, I mean, when I say it's a giant step up, I mean, I could only imagine what those checks look like that you guys authorize the superintendent to write.
They're big.
And some of them are absolutely massive. And you're, in a lot more ways than your local city government, you're tied to the millage rate of the county. I mean, not that we're not tied to it, but we're just a much smaller.
Well, the way that schools work in Georgia, it's a partnership between the state and the local. Mm-hmm. And there are counties in Georgia they just have such low ability to generate tax dollars that the state funds like 80% of their schools. Here where we are, we're considered a high wealth district, and so
district or county?
District.
Okay.
And we the state funds between 35 and around 35%
less than
of our budget. Yeah, the taxpayers fund over 60%.
And that is done through property taxes.
And we have the lowest millage rate in the metro area.
With $1 million people sitting there footing the bill.
True.
Let me ask you this. I know over the last couple of years, there are several counties that surround Fulton with respect to, there's talk at great lengths in other places around a senior exemption. What do you see? How do you think that conversation plays out in Fulton County over the next we'll call it decade? Because if you were going to do something, do you see a day, and do you see a day where there is where seniors get to exempt the school taxes? Do you think that Fulton County is just too populous to be able to do that? What do you?
These are my personal thoughts on it. First, let me give you a little.
I don't care how you feel. I want to see what you think.
Let me give you a little bit of detail because there has been talk about that at the Gold Dome the last couple of years, and definitely people who want to see us have a senior exemption. You can't have the lowest millage rate and a senior exemption. Those things are kind of not. They don't work together very well.
Sure,
but
that's just math.
That's just math. But we know that a lot of people are asking questions and they want data. So we actually got a consulting group and we hired them to build us a model so we could, because every time you ask Georgia State a question about taxes, it's a static question and you just ask the question and they give you the answer back. So if you want to find out what the tax impact, and really I think, as far as the senior exemption, do I think that there will probably be a senior exemption in our county? Yeah, I do. There are probably a lot of different ways to make that happen. Number one, I very much doubt that a senior exemption at 62 like Cobb has would be affordable. Cobb is finding it not affordable. So I just don't think that would be affordable. And then there's been some talk about having a requirement that you live and pay taxes in Fulton for X amount of time before you're eligible for it, which kind of makes sense. You don't want people just coming and never contributing to the community. because schools do make the community.
Absolutely.
And
When you look, and I'll tell anybody listening, if you live in North Fulton, there are all sorts of reasons why your property is worth more today than it was 10 years ago, but there is no two ways about it that the schools are the absolute golden goose to why people continue to seek this place out. It's not a downtown, it's not a walking path. All those things are great. They pale in comparison to why people move here in order to live and raise their family. And
100% agree.
And schools are absolutely, that gets lost because it's not the most political thing to say, because I'm a city council member. I don't have that much control over whether a school gets built where. That's not really what I do. But I just see it. And you look at and you look at the places, if you've ever lived anywhere else in the country where the schools weren't as good, man, those property values absolutely follow that. There's a bunch of things that are tied to it, but I think you could tie your Class A office space to, there's a correlation between your school system, the local elementary, middle, and high schools, the value that community places on higher education to affordability or an office space. Just absolutely.
There's no question. If you asked 30 years ago when we moved here to Atlanta, the Atlanta area, and we started looking at houses, it was obviously one of the top things that we looked at. Was even back in 89, we were looking at what do schools look like?
Right.
And if you've asked, and that is one thing that has not changed at all in 30 years. If you meet somebody who moved here and you ask them why they've got kids, and then why did they move here?
Under 45
Schools.
years old, no question.
They moved here because of the schools. And actually, good schools are like an insurance policy even if you don't have kids, or even if your children have graduated, because as long as there's good schools, there's going to be demand for your house.
Absolutely. Well, and I looked, and I'll just, to laugh about this, my brother worked for Young Life and through Roswell High School. And I had worked in commercial construction prior to the recession, when all the cranes disappeared and nobody built anything for like 10 years.
Except schools.
Except schools, which is, part of the reason why you see the new Milton High School, you see Cambridge, is like, God, when did they afford this? They were the only people building anything.
That is exactly right.
It was easy. If you were a general contractor, you wanted a piece of that thing. But when I looked at that, I was moving back over here, and I remembered just the nuts and bolts that I saw off Mayfield and off Freemanville Road, and I thought, man, if I could ever afford to live over there, I'd do it. And when we got married and we're moving back, I started looking. Greatschools.org. You look at, and it is just, I had no kids. I'd been married for a year, moved back here, lived in an apartment down by the new SunTrust Park for a year. But it was the only place I looked. And it wasn't that there aren't other good schools all around Atlanta, but they just had your access to interstates and major thoroughfares, and your cost of living. And in 2011 is not, what's about to be 2019, 2020.
Right.
It was a much different real estate market, but man, was I right.
I mean, it's, and it's so interesting because so many of the young families that are moving here, they're, both of them are working. And, I hear, Alpharetta's not affordable. Well, I don't know if it's not affordable for families. That depends. My son's 31, and he lives in Washington, D.C. If he wants to buy something, his starting price is $1 million.
Yeah, and that's
like
probably
$500,000 is like way cheap for him.
Yep. It's a sliding scale.
It is.
I spend a ton of time all over the place, and even when you look out at the West Coast and Silicon Valley,
right,
great schools,
New Jersey,
yeah,
New York,
and it's the same pockets all over the country, regardless of how you feel about politics. The places that are worth tons and tons of money, man, they pride themselves on that education. And I definitely see, as you've seen all the tech companies come out here, man, those people are very educated and they value the school system. I'm going to sit on the school governance council next year. I know nothing about,
But you value schools.
but I value schools.
And you know people. And here's the interesting thing. Mercedes just came here, right? Recently. Well, they were looking in the Atlanta area.
Tell this story. This is good.
Yeah, they were looking in the Atlanta area back in when Dr. Avosa was our superintendent. And he gets this super secret call. And somebody from, a chamber said, got to have you meet with a company. They're thinking about like relocating here and it's a big deal and it's top secret and you can't know what the company is. So they're like, when? Like right now, So he like hops in a car and he goes down there and he meets with a panel of people. And they wanted to ask him questions about the schools. They wanted to know if there were international baccalaureates. They wanted to know, they asked all very, very intelligent questions about the school system in Fulton County. They said, thank you very much. He packed up his briefcase and he went back to the office.
Had no idea why I was there.
Had no idea. Told us afterwards and said, I have no idea who I met with, but I think I did well. And so come to find out, it was Mercedes-Benz. And I've been told by somebody that it was actually the tipping point for them because he so impressed them with statistics and what he knew about Fulton County schools that was a tipping point for them because they wanted their people to have a place to come that was going to be great for their families.
I think I won't say it's every week. I think and I don't know that it's fine to share it, but as I sit in public hearings and I look at everything that comes in front of me on a Monday night, once a month, the first question that I always read in that packet that I think out loud, what is this going to do to my local school system? For that reason, and we moved to, when my dad was transferred here, he was in the service, and they looked off Freemanville Road and Trotter's Ridge, and they looked at Gwinnett County, and they selected Gwinnett County. And my mom thinks all the time, and not that Gwinnett was a wonderful community. I wouldn't trade anything about how I grew up or what I learned or who I went to school with and how it prepared for me moving forward. But they were very similar places.
They were. And
they are no longer very similar places. And I have to give you guys a ton of credit for safeguarding the hell out of the education that people get up here. Because it is cognizant. How many familiar faces do you get? How many meetings do you have a month? Or community meetings? One,
well, I have one community meeting a month, and then we have a work session, and then our board meeting. But I meet with various groups, throughout the month, and we have, as I said, lots of retreats.
Lots of retreats.
And we do spend our fair amount of time down at the Gold Dome during the session.
What do you guys advocate for when you go when the legislature is in session? What do you guys advocate for?
We have a legislative priorities list. And of course, something can pop up during the legislative session at any time and sort of takes our attention. But in general, we look for more local freedom from the state. We look for reduced testing to the amount that is absolutely required by the federal government. We look for generally just like the local control. We look for, if you're going to pass a law, take a year and see what the impact is financially on everything first. Let us find out what the impact will be for us and let us report back to you. Those are the kinds of things. Right now we've got, last week I was down at the Gold Dome once or twice. We're working on House Bill 121. And
which is
it's Fulton Industrial Boulevard is like a political football right now.
Oh yeah.
Both the city of South Fulton and the city of Atlanta would like to have Fulton Industrial Boulevard area. And that area produces about $10.3 million in taxes a year.
It's a huge logistical area.
It's a huge thing. And House Bill 121 puts the Fulton Industrial Boulevard actually in the city of South Fulton. And that means that Fulton County Schools would actually keep that revenue and keep teaching those children and then those families, and there would be no disruption. If the city of Atlanta takes it, we will lose $10.3 million.
What is that in the overall scheme of things to
Well,
you
you
guys?
know what? Here's the thing.
Or tell me
Even
what the
though-
next question is that I'm not asking.
Even though we have a $1.4 billion budget, 85% of that is people. So
Administrative
some of that,
staff,
teachers and admin and bus drivers and cafeteria workers and the multitude of people that it takes to run a school system every day. I mean, Fulton County Schools runs more buses than MARTA every day.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it is a large operational organization, and so we're 85% people. People's salaries don't just go up and down.
No.
So that 85% of our budget, it's kind of set.
And it's coming from somewhere.
It's kind of set. So that leaves us a lot less flexibility of what to do with the rest of it. And so when you decide you're going to take the $10 million out of that, okay, so now that's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. That's a lot out of the flexible funding.
So let me ask you this, and we'll wind up here. 21-year school board member. When you start thinking about legacy, what is the one thing you want people to look back on with your time on the school board and be like, Katie Reeves did that and she did it really well? Well, what's your one? Because I can tell you what I think I would you won't take 100%. I'll let you answer and then I'll tell you what I think.
I have really fought relentlessly to keep the foundational basics. It's often an uphill battle in the education world. I have seen so many fads come and go, and so have a lot of my board members. And holding on to the basics that we actually know work, like phonics, like traditional math, those kinds of things, like the ability to let a child go farther if they actually can. We call that continuous achievement. I have fought tirelessly for that. And if you take your eye off the ball, a fad will come in and take over. So I'm really proud of the fact that we've held on to as much of that and tried to get back to it every time we go off course.
I think I won't say this will be your crowning achievement. I think when you look at downtown Alpharetta and you see the STEM school, that I'm sure there's plenty of people down there that are really excited to have that thing open and behind them so that
They are.
It's not 3 a.m. with hammers and jackhammers and cranes and the whole nine. I think the way that I don't know if you can give it all the credit to master planning. I don't know if you can give all the credit to Milton you guys choosing to move Milton up off Freemanville Road to keep that there.
It was tough to hold on to it for a while.
I'm sure, but I think with the ability and just being somebody who lives in a world where we build data centers in some more challenging parts of the country than Alpharetta. When you look at some of the larger cities in the rural southeast, and you look at, we have a hell of a time staffing it with workforce. And you look at the data center architects, you look at network engineers, people that know the nuts and bolts and how this digital economy,
cybersecurity
works. And those jobs, you don't struggle to find these people here. You struggle to find people that can execute on those jobs in other parts of the Southeast. I am confident that facility that you guys are, it's a bell cow. And kudos to you for hanging on to it. But the people that you're going to educate, the overall effects will not even be known for 20 years. But the number of students with the skill sets that the 21st century digital economy is going to require are coming out of there. They're not coming out of, a business school. No offense to,
I agree.
No offense to those people, because I'm one of them. but having people with those useful skills as these jobs translate to where there are things that are just more automated. Good for you. And it's one of those things that you can't see and you can't touch, but it's real. And until we started trying to hire people in some of these other places, it was just tough to find somebody. If you can teach somebody at 16 while their brain is not done developing, man, you are equipping them for a better life. No two ways about it. That being said, I also think moving Milton and Cambridge and opening those schools up here and really solidifying great pieces of property to educate high school students. And, in a time when you guys took advantage of the economy of the day.
We did.
Because when you look at some of the plots of land, if you've never been by Milton High School, you should go because it looks like a castle.
University of Virginia is what it looks like.
Yeah, well, it's beautiful. But as great as Milton and Cambridge are, and I'm sure, we're zoned for Milton High School, the odds that 2 of my 3 kids go there are really, really high. That STEM school is going to change lives.
I have to say, we are blessed by amazing school leadership at our high school level, at all of our schools, but our high school levels particularly. Here in Alpharetta, you've got some of Alpharetta goes to Milton, you got some goes to Cambridge, and you got a lot that goes to Alpharetta High School. We have really, really talented principals in those schools, and they make sure that these schools live up to our expectations, and they make sure that all these kids have as many opportunities as they possibly can imagine. So, I'm grateful to them too.
Well, Katie Reeves, thanks for coming in today. I appreciate you. My name is Ben Burnett. This has been another installment of the Ben Burnett Show and Appen Media Podcast Network. Bye-bye.
Way long.
Really?
I bet. What time is it?
45?
Oh, on the button? Are you amazing or what?